Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first She's on Top panel discussion. If you are back visiting us, you're a member of the community. We're so grateful to have you here. And if you are new, welcome. And let us tell you a bit about ourselves. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Tracy. And She's on Top is about connecting, celebrating, and elevating women. And we do this in a number of ways. The first way is through our videos. We are passionate about interviewing women entrepreneurs and change makers and sharing their stories.
We also have a membership community. This is a place where we work with you to tell the story of your brand and help you connect with potential clients and customers. We also have a private Facebook group where you can connect with other amazing women. This is a great place to collaborate, network, cross-promote, and feel supported, whether it's a course, a hike, or even our Monday morning group meditation.
We would love to have you join our community. And the best place to start is to sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter, where not only do we share community events and news, but also like movies and TV shows and podcasts and things that we find fun and inspiring. And you can go to our website and find all the details there and also details on our membership.
And today we're here to talk about something that's affecting all of us, which is unexpected change.
And we are here to discuss the ways that we're going to embrace change in 2021. And we've brought together 3 incredible women who are not only amazing entrepreneurs, but also experts in pivoting personally and professionally in an ever-changing world. So please welcome our 3 panelists, Joanna Track, Erin Berry, and Fatima Zaidi. Hi, Joanna. Thanks.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So in my current pivot, I am the founder and executive publisher of Newsworthy Co. But most people would recognize The Bullet, which is our daily news publication where we send a daily email digest that rounds up the news in a quick, easily digestible way with a dose of humor to make it go down easier, which I'm sure everyone could agree is pretty necessary these days. Our parent company, Newsworthy, develops content for other brands of all sizes and industries, digital focused content, primarily email and SEO driven content, but we do just about everything. So, and formerly of eLux and Sweet Spot.
Thanks, Joanna. And now Fatima, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, Tracy and Jessica. Thank you so much for having all of us. I'm Fatima Zaidi, the co-founder and CEO of Quail, which is the world's first marketplace for podcasters. We are also a full-service agency where we work with brands to create their podcasts. We are a pandemic company. So what I like to define that is a company that launched just before the pandemic hit back in February. So this entire year, I would say, has been a lot of uncertainty and changes for us. But nonetheless, it's been a wild ride. A couple of fun facts. I'm a huge taco enthusiast, and I was also on a panel with Beyonce's dad, which I think is really cool. Wow. Not as cool as being retweeted by Oprah twice, like my friend Erin Berry here.
Okay, so impressed. Well, then, I guess next is Erin. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Tracy. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you for joining us. So now, Fatima's sort of like giving us away the few little secrets, but can you tell us about yourself and Willful?
Yeah, no one cares about my business now. They're like, tell me the Oprah story. So my day job when I'm not palling around with Oprah on social is I'm the co-founder and CEO at Willful, which is an online estate planning platform. So we help Canadians get a will and power of attorney documents easily online. So we have been live since 2017, so not a pandemic company like Fatima, but we did see a lot of change when the pandemic hit because of the nature of the product that we sell and the fear and anxiety that existed in early COVID. And I run the company with my husband, so that's kind of a fun fact. And the Oprah thing is, it was when her network launched in Canada, and when she gave away the cars, and she's like, "You get a car, and you get a car." I tweeted, "OWN launches in Canada, everybody gets OWN," and then she retweeted me and another one about her network launch. So I did email her and tell her she should hire me, but she never wrote back.
But you're on her radar.
I must be.
Well, as you can see, we've got an amazing group of women here. So we're just going to jump into our first question. Okay, so here we go. Embracing change usually requires vulnerability in one form or another because you're going into the unknown. Can you share something from the past year that made you feel vulnerable, but you're glad you did it? And Erin, can we start with you?
For sure. So what made me feel vulnerable was raising a round of funding during COVID. We had a signed term sheet from a venture capital firm on February 27th. So we're a pandemic fundraiser, not a pandemic company. And as soon as the firm that we were raising from gets their money from a lot of high net worth individuals. And so when the pandemic hit, our funding was really up in the air, and it made me feel very vulnerable because I had already started planning out how we would spend that money and what those resources would do for the company. We ended up being able to close it because I think that initial kind of panic in the markets subsided, as well as the fact that Willful went like this when the pandemic hit. So it was great to be able to highlight that traction and the fact that it was a really great pandemic-proof investment for them. But it made me definitely feel, there were a few days there where I was like, all of this hard work is going to be for nothing. And I'm going to have to start from scratch trying to raise funding in the middle of a pandemic, which seems kind of impossible. So, yeah.
But luckily it had a happy outcome.
It did have a happy outcome. We ended up closing the funding on May 30th. We raised 1.1 million from a venture capital firm in Montreal, and they're really, really amazing and are super aligned with our mission. So yeah, it was, you hear all these stats about the lack of VC funding that goes to women. And so I'm now proud to be a stat that is in the minority of women who have raised VC funding. And I'm always happy to share insights with anyone who's starting their fundraising journey.
So brilliant. What about you, Joanna? Anything that you can share with us?
Absolutely. So for me, it was really getting my blog off the ground, Your Average Joe. So for quite a few years, through all my different digital publications, I've had fits and starts of writing my own articles. I tend to be the wizard behind the curtain and not so much put my face or name to stuff. It was always the company's brand. And I had all these ideas and thoughts of what I wanted to explore. I also had this angst around writing. I grew up a math major, finance person. It was all about numbers, and having to write really made me feel anxious and vulnerable. And then ironically or not ironically, when the pandemic hit, my team was encouraging me to, communicate with our community and really be clear about what we were going through and the support we needed. It evolved into me finally committing to regular weekly blogging, where before I'd write 3, I'd skip it for 3 months. And I'm now proud to say, as of this week, I've written 32 weeks in a row.
Wow.
Yeah. Well done. Actually, I said in my blog last week, I feel like I've only scratched the surface. Now that I've started to do it, I have a greater appreciation for writers and storytellers who really put things out there that are quite personal and vulnerable to them. And so I'm hoping in 2021 that I'll be able to, dig a little deeper and share a little more.
Well, I know I'm a huge fan. It's one of my favorite things to read every week. So
thank you.
Well done, you.
Thank you.
And what about you, Fatima?
That's amazing, Joanna, by the way. I can't wait to check out your blog. There should be sort of a share function where you can drop it in the chat where we can all click to it. This is shameless promoting. I'm all about the call to action.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say that because we're a completely bootstrapped company, we were thinking about raising capital right before the pandemic. And similar to Erin, we were right up to term sheets as well with a particular investor. And after the pandemic, it just didn't plan out, which ended up being a blessing. A few months ago, we had the opportunity to acquire a production company. And I mean, from a vulnerability standpoint for me, I think it made me really nervous to just all of a sudden overnight go from 3 people to 10 people, as well as incurring all of that additional overhead with no capital source and just relying on our day-to-day revenue. But I think where I was really lucky is that I've been in sales my whole career, and I'm very comfortable with uncertainty, and every day is an emotional roller coaster, and that sort of resilience, I would say, has sort of stayed and made me a lot more pro-risk. And so we decided to go for it. It's been about almost 3 months now, and so far so good. There haven't been any firings or mass layoffs yet, so
congratulations.
Yeah. Congrats.
Small feat.
Thank you.
I know, I think it's amazing. All three of you have been like really vulnerable and taken on things during COVID. Most of us are like sitting at home, like, you know, watching movies that you've gone out and done.
I did that too. Yeah, to be clear, I have consumed so many bottles of wine and so many Netflix movies. So in between the fundraising, I have done exactly that.
Yes.
Well, that sounds great. So let's jump into our next question, which is we're going to focus now on 2021. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for companies going forward? And how would you advise them to embrace it? So why don't we start with Fatima this time?
So I think, you know, sort of speaking to my last example where I've been in sales, and I think being an entrepreneur or founder is very similar in that, you know, there's days you're on top of the world. There's days you feel like you've hit rock bottom. In fact, you probably have more of those days than the positive, good days that sort of keep you going. And I think that oftentimes, because there's so much uncertainty and so much rejection, people develop this fear of rejection. And, you know, I think I have it a lot too, especially these days where it's hard to always see the silver lining day to day. But I would say that I think that when it comes to being a really resilient entrepreneur, the skills that I look for are the grit and the hustle and the ability to bounce back. And not just for being an entrepreneur, also just for any early stage employee that I'm looking to hire for my company at this stage. And we know, I would say that getting your ducks in a row takes way more work than commanding them to line up. COVID or no COVID, I think it's, you know, every day's a wild ride for us. And I only have, I think, the pandemic as an example. This is my first company, but I would say just, you know, leaning on past experiences that it doesn't necessarily become less crazy. I think right now it's just a difficult time, but really embracing those qualities of being resilient, grit, and hustle, because those skills matter much more than the fancy resume with bells and whistles.
That makes sense. Joanna, would you agree? What are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. And what I also think is going to be challenging for companies is, I mean, just as we had no idea this was going to hit us and how we were going to react, nobody can predict with accuracy how consumers are going to change their ways. You know, right now we're limited to how we can interact with consumers or consumers can interact with brands because so many things are locked down. When things open up again, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to go running back to the old normal. You know, some people are going to be like the first one out the door to, you know, get out and travel and do stuff. And other people have now changed their way of living and thinking that they're not going to go back. So as a brand or a company, you have to kind of be ready to get people where they're at and have that flexibility. And I think the valuable lesson that a lot of companies learned, especially a lot of the bigger corporate ones, the ones who didn't really allow flexibility or work at home, they've now realized that there is more than one way to do things. So I think even consumer-facing companies now realize that they have to, you know, provide the offerings and let consumers choose, because you're not going to be able to choose for them. And at this point, consumers don't even know what they're going to want when all is said and done.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, no one knows what's going to happen, right? And are we going to go back to our old ways? Who knows? Erin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think both great points on the note of kind of consumers and employees. I think the biggest change that I think will be hard to struggle with is just the move to remote and how that affects cultures on teams, especially the dynamics when people are really struggle without in-person communication. So specifically, you know, how do you have those water cooler chats? How do you recreate brainstorms and whiteboarding sessions and team events and create that same sense of shared purpose and mission and values when you don't have those same in-person opportunities? So, you know, I was in a session today with our venture capital firm, and we're talking about this concept of above the line, below the line. It's a conscious leadership principle. And essentially, if you're above the line, you're coming to a meeting positive and you're looking for solutions, not problems. And you're, you know, just thinking about the future and moving it forward productively. And if you're below the line, your ego is driving your decisions and you're coming with problems, not solutions. And I think a lot of us have dipped below the line a lot during COVID because it's really easy to tell ourselves stories about dynamics with coworkers, or that person doesn't like me, or because we don't have those kind of opportunities to untell those stories or unlearn them. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, at least in our company, is how do we keep people above the line and make them self-aware about the stories that they're telling themselves because they don't have that same in-person interaction.
Wow, that's so interesting. I haven't thought about that before, but you're so right. It's like, and how do you go about doing that?
Well, I don't know. I just learned about the concept today, so I'll fill you in next year.
Okay, we'll do another panel. So, as we were saying, well, here's something that affects all of us, and that's social media, and that's changing all the time as well. Like this year, we've seen the explosion of podcasts, as Fatima will know, and we've had TikTok. But there's also our standards, which are Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter. So how do you decide what to invest your time in 2021? And Joanna, we can start with you.
So I am not a big social media person to begin with. I consume quite a bit of it, but I don't, again, I'm more wizard behind the curtain. So I don't spend a lot of time putting it out there. I've recently, actually, another thing I've stepped out of my comfort zone is to do more of it. However, within my own companies and also having consulted with people on digital strategies for a number of years and things like that, I always say the same thing is really matters on your business objectives. I find too many people often say, what should I do on Instagram? Or, I actually was a professor of digital marketing at York for a couple years. And, the students would always, come at things like from the tactic first. And I would say, what are you trying to achieve? And then look at each social media channel and figure out if that one helps you get to your objectives. You can possibly and very likely never be on Instagram and still have a really great business if your business isn't an Instagram friendly business. But often many marketers think that they have to tick all the boxes. And so I guess the summary answer is that I don't think 2021 will be any different than any of the previous years of social media, or new channels that we haven't even conceived of yet are going to come up. And it still goes back to the same way of thinking of, what does your business need, and then feed out from there.
It's so smart, because I know even with Tracy and I, because we're a small company, we literally couldn't handle all bunch of social channels and do well. So, we don't do Twitter, we do, YouTube, a little bit of Instagram and Facebook. So it's exactly to your point. What do you think, Fatima? We know you're a big fan of the podcast. That's the newest thing.
Yeah, I feel like this is a tailor-made question for me. Now is my opportunity to do a very, very great shameless sales pitch. Truthfully, yeah, I think everyone's going to be listening to advertising or have their own podcast in the next 5 to 10 years. But the non-salesy answer would be that I think everybody consumes content in different ways. For some people, it's visual. For some people, it's audio. For me, it's definitely audio. I've been a consumer of podcasts since 2014 when Serial became a household name. But I would say that I think, and this is, divulging a little bit from the question, but the one thing the pandemic has sort of showed me is it's okay to slow down and invest your time in external things that don't necessarily have to be related to your work and social. You don't have to be on all of the social channels engaging all the time. And this is something that I've actually been really bad at, as Erin can attest to. I was always that person who wanted to hustle 24/7 and be the first one in the office and the last one to leave. And eventually I just burnt out. And I think this pandemic has shown me to slow down and invest in things outside of social. It's the 21st century. I'm still not on TikTok, which is pretty unheard of as a millennial. But now I'm taking the time to invest in other things like my personal health and just, more time for podcast consumption and things I really enjoy and love. And I don't have to be working 24/7 and can just be productive in the times that I allocate for work and be more present. So all for social media. Again, agree with Joanna, where it really depends on what your objectives are, and you should tailor your brand and business to the different tactics out there. But it's also okay if you want to take some time to disconnect from social as well.
It's such a good point. I think we could do a whole separate panel discussion on burnout, because everybody I know is being here, especially just trying to figure that one out. What do you think, Erin?
Well, I have to say I'm on TikTok, so I'm going to share my insights there. You know what? To me, personally, I've gotten way more invested in Twitter. I've been on Twitter since 2008 and I love it, but I feel like there was a period in time there where I just fell out of love with it. And to me, Twitter has really been this bonding experience through the pandemic and the election and all of these things. So personally, I spend the most of my time on Instagram and on Twitter. And Instagram is kind of our market. I mean, we're a B2C company. Our target audience is, Canadians between 30 and 60 who don't have a will. So Instagram is a great place for us to be. Whereas for Fatima, who's B2B, it's much better for her to be on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. TikTok was really an experiment. I was one of those people like Joanna, who is just totally a consumer of the app and a lurker. And I finally was like, wait, I have not seen one piece of estate planning content. I've seen all of these other professionals. My audience increasingly is on this app because so many older millennials and Gen Xers started getting on TikTok when the pandemic hit. So I decided to do an experiment of, could I create some content around estate planning and reach an audience there for my business? And I went whole hog on it for like 3 weeks. My husband thought I was crazy because I would shoot videos in different outfits and like literally just like worked on my TikTok strategy. And then I kind of just abandoned it because I was like, okay, I proved that it was useful, but it's so much work and you have to really like put yourself out there. To Joanna's point, you feel very vulnerable because they're all videos of you. But anyways, I saw tons of great comments. We had people emailing our customer support line being like, I saw you on TikTok. So it was a really good validation to step outside your comfort zone. And I think we also have this tendency to dismiss things as apps for the youth. Like, oh, I could never use TikTok because I'm 35 and everyone on it is 17. That's ridiculous. But to Joanna's point, it's okay. Well, is my audience actually on TikTok? And could I experiment with it? And more importantly, are my competitors on TikTok? Because none of my old stodgy white male estate lawyer, founders of my competitors or lawyers are using TikTok. And so to me, it was this wide open field to have access to build my brand in a place that nobody else was trying to capture eyeballs.
I love that. And Jess, maybe we have to get on TikTok. We'll just add that. We'll add that to our list of things.
Our next panel will be my tutorial on dance moves.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I'm your brand message to music.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn it into a dance.
Okay, so another question for you. So obviously 2020 has changed the world forever. And, for example, I think some of you mentioned that, more people are now working from home. But what about the next 5 to 10 years? What are the big changes you think we're going to see? And what do companies need to do to thrive in the next decade? So I will throw that to Joanna.
So I touched on it a little before, but I think, this idea of the flexibility, people adapted to it out of necessity, but it's a matter now of realizing like it is an option and how are you going to work within it. And then Erin said this so well before is, how do you allow for that remote work and, working from home, but also create a sense of community. So I think the next few years is going to be about finding that balance between, connectedness and community, but flexibility. And, I know for many years, especially when I worked in advertising, I used to get so aggravated when you had to come into the office just because that's what people do. And, if you tried to ask them, I want to work from home today because I have no meetings, I want to do this. They're like, well, if we let you do that, we're going to have to let everyone do. The amount of times I heard that, like, I could just like lose my mind. So I think that stuff's going to go away. And there is going to be more focus on the quality of work versus what time you got it done and where you were. And so, the measurement of performance is going to change. The sense of community is going to change. But, I think, you said 5 to 10 years, and I always laugh at that. I'm like, 5 to 10. Who knows what we're going to be doing in a year? So, yeah,
it's true. I think we used to think of it like even with the business plans, like we used to think in terms of 5 years or 10 years. Now it's like 6 months. We just don't know, right? Everything is technology is changing so quickly, and everything is just moving so fast. So, Erin, what are your thoughts on? You'd like to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, first I just have to shout out Julie Cole. If it's the Julie Cole from Mabel's Labels, you have 6 children, many of whom are teens. They should come in and teach the TikTok workshop, and they'd probably be so embarrassed if they look at mine. So, but yeah, I think to echo Joanna's point, to me, the name of the game, and this is something we've really been focusing on as we're growing up and scaling up as a business, is figuring out the metrics that matter for our business and kind of tracking them across the company religiously. I think it's really easy to all kind of be moving in different directions and to have a different definition of what success is for your company. One person thinks it's the number of website visitors, another person thinks it's the number of sales, and nobody's really aligned. And then from those kind of high level metrics to ensure that each person has KPIs that, to Joanna's point, make it stupid simple to know whether someone is meeting expectations. And I actually give two tiny shits if you are at your desk working from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., if that's what works for you, or if you're in another time zone, or if you're, online between feeding your dog or your kids or your husband, whatever. To me, it's more about the output and not hours output, movement towards those key metrics. And so we're in the process. We just read a book called Lean Analytics, which has really helped us to define what those metrics are, but making sure everyone kind of has this personal scorecard that makes it obvious where they are, if they're progressing. I think a lot of companies are going to move towards that, because this trend of people policing, making sure your webcam is on and policing the hours that you're working while working from home, these are the employers that are going to shrivel up and die in the next 3 years. It's completely ridiculous. And I think anyone who embraces, to Joanna's point, flexibility and autonomy while still hitting metrics is going to win in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I don't know, I find that I'm more effective now because I don't know, I don't mind being at home. And I mean, obviously don't love COVID, but it's easy to balance family and friends and work. And I don't have to do it from 10 to 5. If I want to do it in the middle of the night, I can. So it makes sense. Fatima, what are your thoughts?
So I've been in sales my entire career. And so the nature of my job has always been virtual. And I have been screaming this till I've been blue in the face, that we do not necessarily need FaceTime. And that concept of you have to be in the office between 9 and 5, even if it doesn't work for you, even if that's not your learning or productivity style. So I think a lot of companies now are embracing the whole, and I like to call it the millennial mindset, but really it's a pandemic mindset, which is you now don't necessarily have to have that FaceTime and have the flexibility to build your own schedules. But I think it's also about finding a happy medium. I mean, there's definitely things that have made us more efficient during COVID, but I remember this meeting that I took over a decade ago with a mentor of mine. Spoiler alert, it's Erin. And she said to me that offline tactics have the power of forming stronger relationships. And she has built her entire personal brand through one handshake at a time. Erin, do you remember this? Do you remember this conversation?
Yeah. People would say, I'm sure Julie gets this as well, how do you build up followers on Twitter? And I always say one handshake at a time.
Yeah.
A lot of hours went into those Twitter followers.
Well, see, that's exactly it. And I look at my personal brand, and I've also built my entire, network one handshake at a time. And I think because of digital transformations today and SEO and all of that fun stuff, we can build our companies on our couch in our onesies without ever having to leave the house. And I hope that we don't lose that concept of, offline relationships, the face-to-face interactions, and really building those warm connections, because that was a really fun part of my job. So we'll see.
That's so great. It's funny. I love that one handshake at a time thing, because, as we're building out our brand, I actually I like making that connection, because our whole thing is about connecting women. And the more I know about somebody, the more I carry them in my head, and I can think, oh, this person would work with this person and this person would work. And you actually do bring up a community that, I think Julie Cole said, the best thing you can do is be your community's BFF, and I think that's such a smart way to look at it. So that's really great. Well, I think we're doing okay for time, Tracy.
Yeah, we can do one last question.
Okay, so you know what? For the last one, we'll just throw it out to you guys to share any final thoughts, what you're thinking. So this time we'll start with Erin for final thoughts.
Oh my God, without prompt, I have no thought. My brain is empty.
Do you need a prompt, or because
I'm hanging out in the chat over here. So if anyone has a question, I would love to address it. I mean, for me, I don't know if anyone feels this way. Julie can probably, I'm sorry, I keep mentioning Julie because I know her and she's in the comments, but our business went from 3 people in January of 2019 to 15 now. And I think what I struggle with, and the vulnerable thing that I can share, is I feel like I'm worried that I won't be able to do it from 15 people to 50. And so that challenge to me is the big one that I'm thinking about. How do I continue to learn and grow, whether that's from business coaches or from books or courses or other people who have been there, done that? And I think it really starts with this. An investor said today, asking for help is a sign of strength and self-awareness. It's not a sign of weakness. And it really resonated because I've always been such a person that seeks out help and that admits when I don't know something or when I need someone to augment my skills, which is why I hired Fatima to do sales at my agency, because I'm absolutely terrible at it. So I think that's my theme for next year, is really kind of being vulnerable with asking for help and recognizing that it actually is a sign of strength, and that asking for help and leveling up is the only way that I'll be able to scale the business into, the next 5-10 years.
I think that's so, Scott. If Tracy and I did not ask for help, we would not be here. A whole new landscape for us. So I absolutely love that asking for help is in vogue, because that means we're all set. So what about you, Joanna?
Well, it's something that I've said for years, and COVID has further proven it, is there is no certainty. And especially these days, as far as career go, there is no job stability. Whether you work for a big corporation or you run your own business, there's no guarantee of anything. And that's not meant to come off negative. It's more to take off the pressure. If you think of it that way, then every day is a new opportunity. And you're more adaptable to change. Whereas, if you're too rigid and not sort of aware that things can, change out from under you at any minute, then it's really hard to pivot or embrace the uncertainty. But the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. So, I would expect, even when COVID is hopefully behind us, other things will come our way. And if everyone globally has learned anything, is we can get through it and ride the next wave, whatever that will be.
It's such a good point. I think COVID has made us all improvisers. I took improv many, many eons ago. The thing that I took away from it is that no matter what happened, you had to say yes and I've always carried that with me. It's just say yes to what's happening and it's served me very well. What about you, Fatima?
Yes, and I would say that, I think for me, the last year has been a really great MBA for just being an entrepreneur, in the sense that there's so many factors outside of our control are variables that we cannot control. And as someone who has a really hard time not, knowing all the answers and having a plan for everything, I've really had to focus on reimagining my business in the short term. And so I think just really that is going to be my mantra and lesson as I move forward, is that I won't necessarily have all the answers. I won't be able to control the external variables, and none of us will. And so we may as well embrace the change, the uncertainty, and the vulnerability, and know that it's just a part of the life lesson of being a founder or an entrepreneur, or, at an early stage company.
Beautiful. I absolutely love that. Well, what do you think, Trace? We'll wrap it up?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, this has been so much fun. We want to say thank you to all of you. It's been interesting and it's been enlightening, and we're just super grateful. So thank you, Joanna Track, Aaron, and Fatima. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
It's been great.
It's been great. We will be sending all of you who have joined us today a follow-up email with information on how to connect with these guys.
And we'd also like to say a big thank you to Lindsay Silverberg and Natalie Gardner, who have helped us create and implement this panel. You guys talked about asking for help. Well, Lindsay and Nat, thank you. We couldn't do it without them, and we are forever grateful.
And if you've enjoyed this panel, please check out our website and sign up for our newsletter. We have amazing guests, as you can see, like our panelists, and we'd love you to be part of the conversation. And we are also going to be launching a podcast in the new year, so stay tuned for more details.
Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jessica.
Bye.